Well, since starting this show and talking college basketball, one of my favorite things that we've come across is evanmiya.com. It is an awesome tool, analytics, statistics, talking about all things college basketball. We've
Definitely.
used it several times on this show, individual player rankings, team ratings. I mean, in the world of college basketball right now, if you want to know how two teams might match up, you want to know how a specific player is performing, one of my favorites is how guys play together on the floor at the same time.
Yep.
evanmiya.com is definitely the place to go. We've talked about it many times on the show, and we are super excited to welcome onto the show today, Evan Miya. Well, Evan, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Really happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, tell us a little bit to get started, just how all of this got started and your love for college basketball turned into some analytics.
Yeah, so I've grew up watching sports, loved college basketball specifically, and I also am a big stats guy. I'm working on my PhD in statistics at Baylor right now. I'm about a year from graduating, and so statistics and sports analytics is kind of a perfect or sports analytics is a perfect intersection of those two things that I love most. And so with all of the free time that I had working on my PhD, which really, isn't a ton, I wanted to apply some of the stuff that I've been learning over the years to sports. And so that's kind of how this, my website got started, just kind of a side project that I'm working on. So that's kind of how it came about, but it's a really easy extension for me of the stuff that I love to do. And so it's not technically my official PhD work or anything. It's a for fun side project, but obviously it's turned into something that's been pretty fun this season.
Yeah, definitely, man. That's a heck of a side project to take on. I know Drew and I have used it in your analytics a lot.
Yeah.
So we're definitely big fans of that. And speaking of your website, man, the first thing that pops up, kind of your landing page, if you will, when you go to it, is the player rankings tool. And we actually did a video recently on that, where Gonzaga at the time, I think they had 3 of the top 5 players.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at it based on today, the Zags have 4 in the top 6. I mean, it really is that something we've ever seen before?
No, it's not. So my database goes back to the 2016-2017 season, and it'll go back further this offseason once I have more time to get more data in there. But there's a good 5 years of data in there when you include this year. What is happening with Gonzaga, and you can also throw Baylor in the mix there because they've got several players in the top 10 as well. It seems like there's a large clump for those two teams at the top, but that's extremely rare. The most that we've ever seen from a team in a previous season having any amount of players congested in even the top 25 was Villanova back in 2017 or 2018, and they had 6 players in the top 25. But I've never seen a team have 4 in the top 10. So the way that Gonzaga is separating themselves from the rest of the field in terms of having high impact players, it's extremely rare, and it shows just how good they are this season.
We just did a video on we did our all-time Zags starting 5, and we used your metrics heavily on that. And, you've got Corey Kispert having an unbelievable season this year. He made our starting 5, but our starting center was Brandon Clark. And he's really the only guy, as far as your numbers go back, whose total BPR kind of is in the same range as this year's team. Talk a little bit about his season versus what you're seeing out of this year's Zag squad.
Yeah, so Brandon Clark has the highest Bayesian performance rating of any Gonzaga player in my database at 121.7. And I think that actually is, if I'm correct, it's second all time in those 5 years behind only Zion Williamson.
Yeah.
So he had an incredible year. It is possible that if Gonzaga continues to play well this season and Corey Kispert and Drew Timme play as well as they have been, that they could possibly approach that level, because as the season progresses, if a player plays at the same level, basically the model becomes more sure of how good that player is. So it's very possible that their ratings could continue to rise and potentially be in the area of Brandon Clark. Another player I also threw out there that actually is ahead of where Corey Kispert and Drew Timme are right now is Nigel Williams-Goss in 2017. He also is the only other Zag player with a better rating than either Corey Kispert or Drew Timme this season. But still, there's never been a year where you've had two guys like Kispert and Timmy who are as high as they are this year. So it's really impressive what they're doing, and those two in particular. You can throw Jalen Suggs in the mix, but Kispert and Timmy's numbers in particular are the ones that really stick out to me.
Yeah, Nigel Williams-Goss was our starting point guard. We had Suggs at the 2.
Yep.
In ours. Kispert was running at the 3.
Yep.
On ours, and who was our 4?
I went with Rui. Wanted a little bit of spacing and just be able to run the floor.
Now, you talked a little bit about Baylor. Obviously, that's the matchup we almost got. All of college basketball is hoping we get to see this matchup come March. What do your numbers tell us about how that matchup might play out if we do get to see them play on the court?
It would be a historically great matchup. I know there was a lot of press early in the season when they were about to play talking about how, according to Ken Pomeroy's numbers, this was going to be the biggest, most exciting regular season game in a long time, and even matched up with a lot of big March Madness games. I think now if they met in March Madness, it would be potentially the greatest game of all time, given how dually dominant both teams are. And, they've been back and forth the whole season in terms of which one looks better in the advanced metrics. Gonzaga right now is number 1 for me, and they have been for more of the season than Baylor has, but they're still pretty close. And obviously Baylor also has 4 players in the top 10 as well, along with Gonzaga. So it would be such a treat to watch, and I really hope that we get to see it.
One of the questions Mark Few gets a lot is, how does this team stack up against other, Bulldog teams? In your team ratings tool, where do you see this year's Gonzaga team versus, say, that national championship team, or even that really good Villanova team you mentioned?
Yeah, so the only team that has had a higher team rating, I think, is actually, I think Gonzaga might have the highest team rating I've ever seen. And certainly they've had the highest team rating that Gonzaga has ever seen. The highest rating for Gonzaga in a previous season was in 2019. And even that one would still stack up third best team this year, right ahead of Michigan. But a very clear distance between 84 in 2019 and where they're at right now at 104. So eclipsing that 100 mark for the team rating in Bayesian Performance Rating is a sign of an extremely elite team who's a front runner for a national championship. And last year, the thing that's crazy about last year, granted, not as many games, given the fact that we didn't have a tournament, but no team was above 80 last year in the entire D1.
Wow.
So, and Gonzaga has a rating of 104 this year. So it's just crazy to me how good and how dominant they are. And at this point, it would be almost a shock if they didn't even make the national championship.
So we are 4 weeks away from actually having a bracket. Selection Sunday was 4 weeks from yesterday.
Yep.
Talk me, Evan, through who are some teams, as I'm filling out my bracket, who are some teams that maybe the national narrative doesn't talk about as much, or teams that could make a deep run, or also get into a little bit, who are some teams that Zags fans might want to avoid in our region?
So I've got 4 teams, 2 of them being top 10 teams that I think are either underrated right now or are better than what their recent performances have shown. The first one is Virginia, and I think Virginia was touted as a top 4 team in the preseason, but had an early season dip. But right now, they're sitting on the 2 seed line, as we saw in the bracket reveal on Saturday, and they're 6th in my metrics. I don't think they're talked about enough, mainly because of their slow style. It's obviously not anywhere near as fun to watch as a team like Gonzaga. And Gonzaga did beat Virginia earlier this year, which, again, they're going to beat most teams like that. But they're a team to me that's not getting talked about enough much, just because it's kind of same old from Virginia. But they've really put a good run of form together. They're the best team in the ACC to me, and they definitely have the talent to get to another Final Four as the defending national champs. Another team also that has had the narrative turned against them recently, but I still think could be in for a big run if they really hit their peak, is Iowa. They've had a bad skid of games recently, and they are only 18th in the nation in strength of record. They're currently at a 4 seed right now based on bracketology, but they're ranked 5th on my site. And I think once they get all of their healthy pieces back, if they are able to return to early season form, it's very possible that they could just shoot the lights out and beat a lot of teams. So those are my two teams in the top 10 in particular that I think have Final Four potential that may not be getting as much press as they should.
That's good, man. And it actually kind of leads in a little bit. So we've obviously talked a lot about who's going to be the National Player of the Year. We've done a couple of videos on it as well. But, through this point of the season, I think from the media, we've seen Luka Garza has obviously garnered most of that hype. Early on, he was considered essentially a lock for National Player of the Year. I got to look at your website, though. One thing that pops out, his DBPR is a 3.0. I mean, you look at the rest of the guys in the top, 25. It's just pretty crazy to see. But if you were going off your metrics and what you see, man, who is your pick for National Player of the Year?
Yeah, it's a great question. Luka Garza, if he wins, I'm not going to be mad about it. His stats are going to be, pretty ridiculous this whole season. Sure. But I got to stick with my guns, and he's only 10th right now in the nation in Bayesian performance rating. As you noted, he has a really low defensive rating. His offensive rating is first in the country, not really a surprise. But to me, he's not quite the all-around player in terms of not only his stats, but how he impacts his team that I think the National Player of the Year should be. So right now, for me, if I had to pick, I would pick Corey Kispert slightly ahead of Jared Butler for that. And the main reason is Corey Kispert, to me, the best player on the best team. He's number one in my metric. His stats are so solid. I don't think he gets enough love for how efficient he is in his play. 56% from the field, 64% from two, 48% from three. And that's mainly just because, they're not on national television in the same way as much as they were early in the season. But I think once they get back on the front of people's minds during March Madness, Corey Kispert is going to show why I think he should be National Player of the Year. Now, Jared Butler could give him a run for his money. Absolutely. He has a really good all-around game. He's averaging 5 assists and 2.4 steals a game to go along with 17 points, shooting really well also. So I think Jared Butler should be up there as well, but right now I'd take Corey Kispert.
I'm glad to hear that this is part of your free time. You're not doing it as part of your schooling. Is you're going to Baylor right now. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's true.
So if we see like a huge flip in the Baylor Gonzaga stats, we'll assume that you're putting this into your degree now. And Baylor said, if you want an A, you're going to have to flip some of this stuff. But am I not mistaken that you're actually a Butler Bulldog fan as well?
Yes, that is correct. I grew up in Indianapolis, and I went to the national championship game versus Duke, where Gordon Hayward almost hit that half-court shot.
That was epic, man.
So that was the start of my Butler fandom, and so they've always been my number one team, even through my years at Baylor. So they're not, really doing great this year, but I'm sticking with it.
Zags fans still have some scars from that college game day experience. That buzzer shot that happened, I think 5-6 years ago now. Right. Awesome game. But Evan, thanks for joining us this morning. Make sure to go over to evanmiya.com. Check out all the tools he has, player, team ratings, a little bit of bracketology on there. I'm really excited to see more years of data get put into the system. So we'll be continuing to talk about that on the show and use these metrics. But Evan, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.